Yep. Okay. Welcome to the Soothing Semantics podcast. I'm your host, Rafi Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, leave your comments. And of course, for any of your real estate needs, buying, selling, renting, investing, make sure to follow Rafi the Realtor on Instagram. All my contact info is there. I also have a weekly newsletter that I recently put together. So make sure to click on the link in my bio, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be glad you did. Today, we have a very, very cool guest. Matt Enns, thank you for coming, man.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, man. It's really so Matt posted an Instagram reel with his wife, and it had to do with dating, and it really, it was kind of discussing the challenges in the dating market. And I made a comment on what I thought were some of the issues and what both sides could do, and Matt liked the comment. He said it was dead on, and I was like, all right, this is my kind of guy. Let me reach out to him.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to quickly introduce you, man, I mean, would you say, as far as a coach is concerned, how would you define your coaching? What would you label it under?
Yeah, I have a men's coaching company. So the issues we tackle are pretty broad, but some version of men who know they could be more than they are, and they're just not sure what's missing.
Gotcha. Well, there's quite a lot of that.
There's quite a lot of that going around. That's for sure.
Quite a lot of a market. So just to give Matt more of an introduction, he was a top performing investment advisor at the 5th largest firm in the world in his 20s. He left Canada to escape the COVID nonsense 2 years ago. Spent about 1 to 2 months in Naples. I'm sorry, 1 to 2 months a year in Naples. You're married 11 years, 2 kids. You have an MBA and studied philosophy and theology at the master's level. You say ate beef and water for 12 months. That's pretty cool. And you're also a jiu-jitsu blue belt.
That's right. My most impressive achievement by far.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's something I got to get on, man. I got to get on that train too.
Dude, it's a beautiful train to be on.
I know. I'm getting on it, dude. I have to do it. So give us a little bit of a rundown on, we're going to really touch up on everything, but I recently saw you posted a reel about you left like 300 million on the table.
Yeah. So I was grinding away at my career as a financial advisor for 7-8 years at this point. And the way that it works in Canada and in much of the United States as well is you basically, you're given a phone book and a phone when you start, and you get like 12 months salary. And then by the end of that 12 months, if you brought in enough assets, enough new business, then that's what you're going to live off of from then on, and you'll continue to build that. So it's a very high attrition rate. Like 90% of the people that I was working with were gone within the first less than a year. Because when you see your salary is about to run out, you haven't brought in enough assets where you can actually make a living. You read the writing on the wall. So I was grinding my ass off, cold calling, seminars, door knocking, like all of it, mail outs, and did that for years, had some good success. And then right as I was making, multiple 6 figures, starting to really feel good, for family reasons, packed up, moved to Vancouver, which is, a few thousand miles away from Ottawa where I started. Did it all again, but managed to do it in less than half the time, got to a good income again. And then I had this awesome opportunity, which is there was a retiring colleague of mine, and I had the opportunity to buy his assets, which means he has a bunch of clients. They have a bunch of money with him that he manages on their behalf. And I was going to take over that chunk of money in those client relationships. So you pay that person out for a few years, but you start making pretty good money right off the bat. And I had that one lined up, paperwork in front of me ready to sign. And then I had another one that was coming a few years down the road. And combined, those would have been very conservatively about 400 million of assets, and would have been a 7-figure income within a matter of years once I paid them off. So it was a lot. It was everything that I've been working for years. I'm the sole breadwinner in my family, so it's like a pretty big deal to have that much money on the table. Finally feel like I'd made it, and like the rest of my life was ready to begin. And at the same time, all this COVID bullshit was going down in Canada, and it looked like my employment was on the line. It was basically, we got an email from HR saying, without saying so, like, you might get fired. Talked to my manager. He said the same thing, like, if you don't get the job, we don't know for sure. My manager was awesome, but basically, I can't guarantee your job. And it's looking like there's a good chance that we're going to do what a lot of companies and the government of Canada has done, which is if you don't get it, you're fired. And so had everything I always wanted, had to compromise my morals potentially to keep it. And I'd been separated from my wife for about 6 months just prior to all this going down. So it was like all of this stuff was happening at the same time. I was going through a major period of personal transformation. And I basically, through dialogue with my wife, I was like, you know what, like, I think this is not worth my integrity. And I think as I'm going through these personal changes that I'm going through, I don't know if this is the life that I want. I kind of fell into this career because we had a kid on the way. We were scared. We needed to do something to bring in money, but I didn't choose this career because it was a good fit. It's what I love. So we basically at that moment decided, like, sovereignty. I'm the sovereign man on Instagram. Sovereignty was the way we were going to live. So we put together a whole new life for ourselves. So we moved to Austin. We were back and forth between Florida and Texas for a while. Ultimately decided upon Austin, started this coaching company, sold my business in Canada. And we live a radically different life right now than we did just a few short years ago. That's for sure.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's amazing, though.
That's the Cole's notes.
Dude, it takes a lot of balls to give up a lot of potential money, but you are not willing to waver on your principles, and your freedom and sovereignty essentially was more important than the potential money. So that it's a big lesson. And I really try to follow after that idea, because the more I look at these corporate jobs, I need to be able to do, say, and think freely. I need to, because I'm going to be dead one day and there's no coming back from it. I mean, I don't know about the afterlife thing. I mean, no one's been able to prove it to me yet. Yeah. I don't know how real that is. We'll see. But until I have proof of that, I need to be on my own terms. So it's such an important lesson. So with the sovereign man, with the new, journey you've gone down, how did you start it out? How did you structure it? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. I was really lucky early in my career. So I'd been doing some coaching on the side, and it was more kind of friends and family clients for my business, my financial business, because that's what I love doing. And that was increasingly how I was managing my financial clients' relationships, was psychological coaching rather than, just focusing on the financial planning and the investment management side of things. And through that, when I launched this, I got some really interesting, really high profile clients right off the bat. And I can tell you offline who those are, but kind of people that you might know who they are. A lot of your listeners will, in the news all the time. And because of that, I had more success right off the bat than I anticipated. And that was kind of how I ran my business for the most of the first year. And then recently my focus has been switching over to Instagram, because as I go on this journey of personal sovereignty, which sovereignty to me encompasses freedom, self-mastery, success. I want to say authority, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Authenticity. And the more I'm true to myself and I'm trying to work more and more with clients that I want to work with, I like working with men who are at a really bad place in their life, but they want to do something about it. And there's a lot of guys who are at a bad place in their life, and they're, as much as for ambitious people, it's hard for us to understand this. Some people are just okay with where they're at. And, those obviously aren't people that I'm excited to work with, but there are a lot of people who they're not happy with where they're at, and they have this drive for something more. And the more I coach, the more I find it's really rewarding to work with those people. And so Instagram, trying to build my Instagram following is basically me trying to find and connect with more people like that, because that's really who I want to work with long-term.
Right. It makes perfect sense. I mean, it's pretty useless to try to, spend time with someone who doesn't have any interest in doing anything, moving the ball forward. Yeah,
for sure. Well, and I mentioned that too, because I think ambitious and driven men, even if that's not showing up in their day-to-day life or in their professional performance or in their relationships, they're so driven for something more, and they assume that that's true for everybody. And there's a lot of people that they're fine where they're at. And I think deep down, there's a call to more inside of them. But there's a lot of people where there's this huge drive for power and success and performance, but it's just not connecting somewhere. There's some kind of a barrier there. And if I can just work on that barrier, that's really exciting to me, because once you get that out of the way, I mean, people are off to the races. So I love working with guys like that.
What do you think? So that leads me to another question. What do you think are common barriers for people, for men specifically?
Yeah. you're going to get a lot of different answers based on who you ask about this, but well, I'll tell you what I find works best, which I think answers the question. In my experience, guys who have that drive and that hunger, but it's just not happening for them, and they're not actually following through, they're not doing the work they know they need to do, they're not following through to the end on things, they're starting and not finishing. They usually learned at some point in their life that that was the appropriate way to handle stress or to handle setbacks. So usually in dialogue with my clients, I can pinpoint, one or two or three single moments in their life where they had a traumatic experience. Now, they might not think about it as traumatic, because traumatic to us sounds like, something really serious and bad, but it might be they had an awkward encounter with a girl. They had a moment where they were, the focal point of attention in a social circumstance, and they embarrassed themselves, something like that. And in that moment, they made a decision without realizing it that, oh, the way to handle intense situations where I'm expected to perform is that I better pull back from that, because I'm going to disappoint and everyone's going to laugh at me, or I'm going to be embarrassed in front of my friends, or my dad's going to say something to me that really crushes my spirit. And consciously, we don't register that, but subconsciously, kind of our animal brain and our animal body goes, that's unsafe, avoid that. And so as you start approaching those moments in your later life, that subconscious part of you kicked in to protect you, and you end up turning off and pulling back. And so I have really specific exercises that I do with clients that I develop myself, which I think is a really interesting story of how I develop them and what they are. But I can usually get through those moments and reprogram the way the subconscious understands them in 20 to 30 minutes per piece. And once you go through the kind of the main 2 or 3 moments like that in your life, rather than having to try to manage your procrastination or manage your fear of public speaking or manage your fear of taking risks for a bigger life, you naturally start doing the things that you always wanted to do. And when you have this drive for more, that's an indication that that's who you naturally are. But something happened along the way that taught you, I need to behave in a certain way to avoid that fear. And that's the barrier that I'm able to work with the clients and break through. When you can do that, I mean, you can get somebody really far, really, really quickly. Like just last week I had a client, and he's somebody who speaks really timidly and in a higher voice, and he's really quiet, and he's concerned about that. He doesn't want to be that way anymore. And we did this 20-minute exercise together, and then we're talking through what happened afterwards. And he kind of pauses and he goes, "I'm speaking in a much lower voice," and his voice had dropped like an octave, and that was just like releasing that belief that his body had, that this is the way I have to be to keep myself safe. And so when you can find those moments, like you can just like unleash people in a matter of minutes. And it's by far the most rewarding part of what I do are those moments. I live for those moments.
It's so powerful. Yeah, you're responsible for changing the trajectory of someone's life. It's super powerful.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. Is like, you're going to see in the next week, like your life's a little bit different. But then as you start tracing that out over time, where you end up in 10 years is going to be radically different than if you hadn't gone through those breakthroughs.
Interesting, man. Interesting. Okay. So what's another example of somebody that you've, that had a challenge and you were able to help them?
One of my first clients, who is a friend of mine, we started working together, and let's just say he was not at a very good place. He's another person who, he's not world famous by any means, but he's in the news a lot right now. And he was just not in a good place. He was not making any money, living with his parents, single, had been single for a while. And we put together a list of things that we wanted to work on together. And we wanted to be able to lease a vehicle, rent his own apartment, make $20K a month, and get a girlfriend. And 6 months later, he owned 2 condos, owned his own vehicle. He's engaged to his now wife, and he was making 20, 30K a month from multiple income streams. And again, that's not how they all turn out, obviously, right? That's very much anomalous. Like that's not what happens.
How did he do that so quickly? That's incredible. How did he do that fast?
So it had to do with reorienting his internal image of himself. So he had this idea of who he was, and this is a guy who'd experienced, or at least tasted, fairly high levels of success multiple times, but it always disappeared very quickly.
Okay. And
so we were able to unpack that part of him that was self-sabotaging, that was unwilling to hold on to success because it didn't align with his own vision of himself. And when we realigned that vision of himself to be okay with success, he went from this place where there's no way out of this, I'm screwed, nothing's gonna get better, like this is my life now, to holy shit, I'm surrounded by opportunities, why don't I just pluck one of these apples off this tree? And as he started doing that, things shifted, really, really fast. But again, that's a special case. They're not all like that, but that's kind of an extreme example of this process. And that just played out over a really short period of time.
Gotcha. So just to kind of unpack this a little bit, this was a guy, or is a guy, who is pretty well known, has a lot of opportunity, and was sabotaging everything. So now when you helped him step out of his own shell, he was able to, grab those opportunities off the grapevine, if you will. And now he was able to turn his life around.
That's right. Yeah. And he was not well known when we started working together. I mean, he was, maybe a little bit in certain circles, but he's risen to a level of prominence that he didn't really dream he would get to. And really quickly. And I can introduce you to him after the podcast if you'd like.
That would be great. I'm really curious to know who you're talking about. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. He probably wouldn't mention. He probably would like if I mentioned it, but I just don't have his permission to. So I'll hold off. But I can tell you after.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Now, just to get into the dating conversation, because this is a very interesting topic to me. I've spoken about it a lot on my podcast. I'm very fascinated by male and female dynamics, but I'm fascinated by the human psyche in general. Now, why do you think people are having, let's talk about America specifically. Let's kind of double down on America versus talking about the entire Western world.
Different story.
Right. So America specifically, what do you think has shifted in the last 5 to 10 years that's made dating such a heavy topic of discussion on the internet? And why do you think it's become so challenging for men and women to find people they want? There's such a high percentage of people are single. Very few people are getting married. A lot of people aren't having kids. What do you think are some of the drivers of this?
Yeah, well, America is a good place to start because America is the West just 3, 4, 5 years before the rest of the West. So whatever's happening in America is going to be happening everywhere else 2, 3, 4, 5 years after. I think there's two things that are responsible for that breakdown. One is the Tinder effect and social media more generally. And one is the breakdown of gender as a concept in the West. So the first one, the Tinder effect, I'm sure you've seen the stats on X percentage of men. I think it's something like the top 10% of men get around 80% of the swipes, right? And that's because women are hypergamous, meaning they want to date at their level or above. And so when you grow up in a small town and there's, the local high school quarterback, or there's the guy who has a few businesses in town who does pretty well, you have maybe a more realistic idea of what a high-performing man is, and you can scale that back a little bit if you can't get that guy, and you can find, the guy who used to play wide receiver on the football team or whatever it might be. But when that biological tendency towards hypergamy gets played out on a global scale, where you're literally connected to all of the high performers on Earth, you have this idea that a high performer is flying on private jets, he's getting bottle service every other night at the club, and he owns a Ferrari. And on a smaller scale in a university, the way that plays out, for example, is you'll have a small number of guys, and then you'll have the women all sharing that small number of guys. And so what happens is the great majority of guys become totally disaffected because they see these women being treated like crap by other guys. They try to treat them well. They don't get any response from it. And they see this world that, to their point, is perfectly unfair. It's like, okay, so the good guys who have integrity and are treating women really well and want to give them a beautiful life, they get shit on. And the guys who treat them like crap, trade them whenever they feel like trading them, and don't give them anything in terms of their integrity, those guys have access to as many women as they want. So this creates this like insane bitterness among a lot of men. And it creates also this jadedness among women where they're maybe not even able to pair bond after, being shared by a bunch of high value guys in their early 20s or something. By the time they get to their late 20s, they're so jaded, they're so sick of men, they have such a bad idea of who men are and their commitment and their integrity, that both genders end up with this tension where they don't respect the other gender.
Okay, real quick. This is beautifully said. So I have to be honest, and I mean this in the night, because what you're saying is absolutely fantastic. This is stuff that all this concept is stuff that I've spoken about at length in many
sure you
podcasts. Whatever. I love whenever I hear people articulate it though, it's just so refreshing to hear it from other people.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Why do women, and I have my answers to this, but I want to hear your take. Why do women especially in their younger years, why are they so attracted to those men? Because I think when they're younger, say in college, they don't necessarily understand the idea of hypergamy. I think it's subconscious. So why do they have such a proclivity to do that as opposed to going for the guys that would treat them well?
Yeah, I mean, I boil it down to the fact that we're animals. I mean, I believe in a higher power. I believe we're spiritual beings. I believe we have a certain level of consciousness that, you know, a more base animal might not have. But at the end of the day, we're biological creatures, and we're driven by our hormones. And if you don't believe this, you know, look at the vast majority of low testosterone men. They're playing out exactly what you'd expect from somebody with clinically low testosterone. And
what are some of those things, just to give people an idea?
Passive, whiny, unwilling to take up the fight after a loss. That's a major thing that testosterone does, is enables you to keep fighting even after you've lost. You'll be willing to compete again, make another cold call after getting rejected. And even morphological features.
This is how I know I have an incredibly high testosterone. Thank God.
Yeah, lucky you. And even like morphological features, you look at young men who have 25% of the testosterone that their granddads would have had at the same age. They have narrow jaws, less masculine features, less broad shoulders. They are biologically malfunctioning. There's no other way to put it. And that plays out in how they vote. It plays out in how they interact with women. It plays out in how they team together to whine as a group. These are all very well documented low testosterone behaviors. But on the hypergamy front with women, we don't seem to have this awareness that we're biological hormonal creatures. We have this stupid idea that, you know, we're beyond that. We're all prefrontal cortex. We're all logical decision making. We think everything through. We're driven by our logical decisions, not by our emotions and our hormones. And when nobody teaches young people this awareness of who we are biologically, nobody studies ethology, animal behavior. Because you study read the book Chimpanzee Politics by Franz de Waal. You'll learn more about human psychology from that really easy, fascinating read than any textbook on human psychology. And when you start studying humans as if they were animal and studying human behavior through that lens, that's how this all plays out. But nobody teaches this to young people. And so they go out there and they're defenseless against their own biological prejudices. And especially because we haven't yet integrated social media and its effect on us into our culture, into our morals. We haven't developed a way of handling this appropriately. Morals take generations and generations to develop. So we haven't done that bad, given that we've had Tinder for like 15 years. But it's maximizing our biological tendencies, essentially. And so when your biological tendencies can scale with technology, that's what happens. And slowly we're learning how to handle that in some small ways, but it's wreaked havoc on male-female gender relations in the meantime.
This is so spot on. So just to kind of double down on, why do you think, though, from a biological level, why do you think women are so attracted, especially in their younger years, to men who are not looking to treat them well, meaning who have so many other options, who will curb them, versus the guy who will be nice? Why do you think they're so driven by that? What are some reasons?
Here's a roundabout answer. So the archetypal story of the male hero, we all know pretty well. It's played on all the Hollywood movies, right? It's kind of a bumbling fool who encounters some obstacle. He gets defeated by the obstacle. He finds a mentor who trains him, teaches him how to fight, teaches him how to handle this, and then he goes out and finds that obstacle again, and then ultimately defeats it, becomes the hero, gets the girl. Mm-hmm. The female archetypal story is more like Beauty and the Beast, or the other one's not coming right now, but Beauty and the Beast, for example. Woman meets this barbaric man who's driven purely by his instincts. He's basically a beast. And through her soft femininity, she's able to tame him and turn him into a prince. And why you want on a biological level to have a beast as a mate is fairly obvious, right? If you're, considering throughout our evolutionary history, we were living in caves and in huts for a lot longer than we're living in condos. And when you don't have air conditioning and Uber Eats getting delivered to your door, you need a beastly man who's capable of handling the saber-toothed tiger, the other tribes that are trying to attack you. So for your biological safety, you need somebody who's a beast. And what the proper feminine does is tame that beast and turn him into basically a domesticated version of a beast. So he can handle all the softness of domesticity, but he can turn on that beast mode when he needs to protect his wife and his kids and their resources. But we don't understand that anymore, that's the role that the feminine can play in helping to tame the male beast. We just think you should meet, and if you love each other, then it should all work out. So the biological part of them that's drawn to that beast isn't matched with the cultural wisdom that says, here's how to temper a beast, and here's how to watch out for guys that are just going to be beasts. And they have the potential to become the prince, but they're just all beast right now. Nobody tells them how to tell that apart, or how to watch for, is this transformation possible with this guy, or is he just going to stay like a beast? And so biologically, they're driven to a lot of these markers of being a more beastly man. But there's no cultural tendencies and no cultural institutions like being polite, like chivalry, like honor, like we used to have, that help keep that beastly tendencies tamed. Right now we have Tinder, which means if you're driven in that direction, you can just do that for the next 10, 15 years of your life and, have a lot of fun the whole time as far as you're concerned.
It incentivizes it completely. This is so good, dude. Matt, you're so well articulated. I love this. It's amazing.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. So, okay. I had one, I wanted to take one part of that and go a little deeper. And I'm trying to remember which component. Oh yes. I remember when you're talking about, and Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, about the idea that women ideally want a dangerous man who they can, not control, but they can tame him to a degree where he's not dangerous to them. That's where right. he's a dangerous man with self-control who can control it. So as a guy, it's also important that if you are becoming domesticated, so to speak, where you settle down with one woman, you swear off other women, you now become a loyal husband, you are being tamed to a large degree. How do you decide as a man now where to draw the line of how tamed you should be? Because say you had a very fit body when you met your girl, and now she kind of wants to fatten you up. I'm sure you know about that concept where, I forget the terminology for it, but they kind of want to fatten you up a little bit to make you less desirable to the opposite sex. How do you decide as a guy how far you kind of allow that to go before you say, okay, listen, you're working a little too hard on the taming. You need to let me be a man. What advice do you give to guys on how to draw that line?
The same advice I give to guys on every problem, which is like, make it your problem. Like, take ownership of that of that problem, make it your problem, take sole responsibility for how that turns out. And what that looks like in this case is, as you start noticing this process of, oh, I'm being domesticated, instead of resisting it or instead of just capitulating to it and going along with it and letting her control the whole thing, say, I need this to happen to some degree so that I can function in the future as a good husband, as a father, as a businessman who's not burning all bridges behind him. I'm going to direct I'm going to direct the process of how much do I want to soften, how much do I want to stay hard, and I'm going to take control of that. So, because what you see a lot with guys these days, and it's really, really sad to see, is indoor cats, right? Like they look like, okay, there's some claws in there somewhere. It looks like you probably know how to hunt, small game, but you're basically just an indoor cat. Like, you wait for somebody to bring you your food. You don't do anything. You lay around. You have no goals. You have no desires. You're so domesticated that you're not a threat to anybody anymore. And that's the feminization of a man. And you don't want to become a feminine man. You want to become a masculine man with a balanced feminine center as well. And I'm not saying your wife is that feminine balance. I'm saying within yourself, you want to have a feminine balance, right? And that can be a feminine balance in terms of your interests. I have a lot of, traditionally feminine interests, like, psychology and art, for example. But I balance those things in a way where I feel like the feminine part of me is in a good ratio to the masculine part of me. And if you don't direct that process yourself intentionally, what happens is, for a lot of married men, their wife will just take away all their masculinity from them and make them into a little girlfriend. And then what happens is she resents you for allowing you to do that to her, or for allowing her to do that to you.
But isn't that funny though? But it's so interesting how women, and I don't see this in like a blamey way, because everything you're saying, I very much have kind of come to that understanding. And I honestly love it. It's a beautiful idea. But it's funny how women try to domesticate you to that point, and you as a man have to, in a way, put your foot down and say, no, no, no. You have to prove your masculinity. I wouldn't say you have to do that forever. I think at a certain point, your significant other realizes that, no, this is who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you think that is on a biological level, that there's that kind of paradox where they want you to be masculine, but they're also trying to do the opposite simultaneously?
Yeah, because they're not internally driven towards the masculine, right? They're internally driven towards the feminine. And so if they're allowed to direct the relationship, that's where they're going to direct it. And they're not going to be consciously aware that they're doing that. And as a result of that, they're not going to be consciously aware of telling you, hey, you need to be a man. They might say that in passing sometimes. They might say it'd be good if you're in shape. But more likely, they're going to react to you emotionally when you're not being a man. Why the hell didn't you stick up for me? Why aren't you working more? Why are you sitting on the couch playing video games all day? But they're not saying that like, hey, I need you to be this type of man. They're just like, I'm fucking annoyed by that. And I disrespect that. And it bothers me. And it causes me emotional angst. And I'm going to put that emotional angst on you. And usually what the guys do in that situation is they lash back and they get into this, basically this feminine swirl of emotions everywhere. And by the end of that conversation, she's not like, wow, this is a man who stands up for himself, who's going places, who's doing things that needs to get done. I can lean on him. He can be my support. They're like, oh my God, like there's nothing there masculine for me to lean on. So it's this like negative downward perpetuating cycle.
So good. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's so accurate. Okay, so now some other things. What do you think men need to do? And obviously we talked about becoming more masculine, testosterone, working hard. In relationships, let's narrow this down. In relationships, why do you feel so many men are lacking in this department, where they're not leading, they're not respected, they're not loved, they're not getting sex? Why do you think so many guys are having these issues? What do they not understand? What are they missing?
Okay, so we finally got to point 2 of the earlier question, which is we don't have any understanding of gender. And like that's playing out in really extreme ways, right? Where like gender doesn't exist. Gender is whatever you feel in the moment.
It's crazy.
All that stuff, which anybody with a bit of common sense who hasn't been brainwashed knows is just completely preposterous and not even worth having don't engage with that stuff like it's worth having an engagement with, right? Just be like, that's crazy, moving on to a different discussion. Right? Don't legitimize it by being like, well, let's have a discussion about this and like let's see. It's like, no, that's batshit next.
Right.
But because of all this confusion about gender in our society, we don't know what a man and a woman are. And we don't know what role a man is supposed to play in a relationship. We don't know what role the woman is supposed to play in a relationship. And there's legitimate reasons for this, right? Like birth control changed the workforce and women's ability to participate in it on their own terms. World War II required that a lot of women get into the workforce. And when you have these massive changes that take place, society has to figure out how that's screwing us up before we figure out how to fix the problem. And another piece in that is feminism. And feminism, as much as we think of feminism as like this is empowering to women, it's not. And not because women shouldn't be able to do whatever they want to do, but because feminism isn't teaching women how to be powerful. It's teaching them how to be shitty versions of men, right? It's like, oh, well, feminism didn't come along and say, here's what a woman is, and here's how to be the most beautiful, magnificent, powerful version of a woman. Feminism came along and said, look what the boys get to do. We can do that too.
Mm-hmm. Or we can do it better.
Yeah, or we can do it better, right? And there's a lot of things that women can do better than men, but there's some things that by and large women can't do better than men. And that doesn't mean that there aren't individual exceptions, right? Like I do jiu-jitsu, my wife does jiu-jitsu. I'm around a lot of like MMA chicks and stuff. Like I know they could kick my ass even though I'm stronger than them because their technique, the technique gap is much bigger than the strength gap.
Sure.
So yes, there's lots of women that can beat up lots of men, but on average, men are going to be more competent in that department. And at the extreme end, all of the best fighters on earth are going to be men always. And there's the same on the feminine side. There's some things that women will always be better at than men on average. And then really extreme examples of women who are the very, very best at it will always be better than the very, very best men. But we've been mixed up about this and we think, it's all just what you want to do. Anybody can do anything. So we've lost this idea that this is what men are supposed to do in relationships. Now you can take that and make your own version of it. And this is what women are supposed to do in relationships. And you can take that and make your own version of it that works for you. We have this idea that, well, it's an equal partnership. And we don't know what the hell that means. So when we say it's an equal partnership, what a lot of people actually mean when you talk them through that is they think everything should be shared 50-50 all the time, right? But how does that actually play out? Like when there's a bump in the night, how many people that believe in an equal relationship are sending the wife down with a knife to go see who's in the kitchen rummaging around at 3 a.m? It's like, well, no, it's the guys that are doing that. So we still, on an instinctual level, we know there are certain roles for each side of the relationship to play.
Bro, you'd be surprised. I feel like in this day and age,
there are lots of exceptions to that. Yeah,
no, I'm
and
saying,
I know
no,
some.
What I was saying to your point about the burglary is there are probably men that are going, sweetie, can you do it?
Yeah, dude. Like I see these videos on Instagram, and it's like, the wife is pranking the husband by pretending there's a mouse that she caught under a pot in the kitchen, and the guy's like jumping on the counter and running and screaming.
Bro,
it's like,
it is the saddest thing. Even when a bug, dude. When I'm out, I don't know. I was at a dinner. I remember this. I was at a dinner. We were eating outside, and it was a Shabbat dinner, and this roach, a pretty big roach, whatever, runs up the wall, and it's running around, and like some of the guys are freaking out, and I turn around to like 5 dudes, and I'm like, it's a fucking roach, man. And I just got up, I stepped on it, and one of the guys goes, oh, you didn't have to kill it. I look at him, and I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, bro, I didn't say anything. I just didn't say anything. I just looked at him. All the girls are obviously so thrilled that I did it because like everyone else was just sitting there. Dude, I don't care how big a rat is, man. I don't care if a rat is 20 pounds. If it's in my house, I'm killing it. I really will I be nervous in the beginning? A little bit, but it'll very quickly, I'll be like, this thing's not going to get, I am much bigger than this thing. I'm going to kill this thing. I really don't care.
100%.
It's just super simple. It's a rat. Okay, can it bite me? Can it give me a disease? Yes, but I am bigger. I will stomp on it. I'll use a chair. I'll use something in my house can kill it. I will kill it. It's just
I'm going to figure it out. And
yeah.
What do I want to show to my kids and my wife that hey, I'm because same thing. I'm not a guy who's afraid of animals or anything, but even there's a mouse running around, part of you that biological part is oh shit, you're kind of hyped up, right? The worst is a little nip on the finger or something, but it's still it amps you up. But am I going to show all of that emotion to my wife and my kids, and then they're going to be like, man, the guy that keeps me safe when there's a bump in the night, he freaks out over a mouse? It's no, I'm not. I'm going to show them that I'm composed and I'm going to handle the problem. Nothing.
What happens if there's a human? If you're afraid of
if
you're afraid of a mouse, what the fuck are you going to do if there's another human male in your house with a weapon? You're fucked. Your kids are scared.
And your girlfriend registers that, and she goes,
"Oh, for sure.
Oh shit, this guy doesn't provide safety because he's afraid of a cockroach." And even if she goes, "Oh, it's not a big deal. He's just cute and funny," on a biological level, her alarm bells are going off. This guy is not going to keep you safe from a saber-toothed tiger. That's how we evolved, right? And nobody really teaches men hey, it's not okay to freak out over a mouse. You have to keep your shit together because this is why it's not okay. This is the effect that it'll have in your relationship. This is how it'll make your daughter feel less safe going to bed at night. This is how every bump in the night will be way more scary to her because she doesn't believe there's somebody in the house who won't be afraid of a bump anymore. And we don't teach this anymore. So nobody knows what the man's supposed to do. Nobody knows what the woman's supposed to do. And it's way too much to figure out as two people. You need culture to take care of 90% of that for you. And then you and your wife negotiate on the borders. Okay, here's where we're going to make it our own. But if you try to design your whole relationship top to bottom just yourself, it's you're fucked. There's no way for two people to do that. It's too great a task for a single couple. And that's why everybody gets divorced. That's part of why everybody gets divorced.
100%. It's so crazy. Yeah. And this is what you're talking about how feminizing men is happening on a world scale now. And some countries are pushing back. Some cultures are pushing back. The cultures that are pushing back are traditional, more religious cultures. So Islamic culture, more religious Jewish culture, more religious Christian culture. They're pushing even though, for instance, I'm not particularly practicing as a Jew, but I'm very traditional. I grew up with religious values. They're still very ingrained in me, and they're never going to go anywhere. The values of male and female. As much as I'm very much pro women having freedoms, it's no. I'm a man. You're a woman. I do this, you do this. You do, I do certain things, you do certain things. We complement each other. There's no, we're not switching roles here. And then there's just the ideas of modesty, ideas of holding yourself a certain way, having certain values in place. Those are things that no matter where I go religiously or what my connection with God is, those are always going to be very important. And people need those things, whether they're religious or not. They need some things to hold on to.
That's right.
So now, in terms of because I really like this discussion of the protective component, and I had a question I wanted to ask, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. what are things? So now you mentioned a very good point of men needing to be. I now remember what it was. You're mentioning men needing to provide security. What do you think about male vulnerability? I have my take, but I'm curious to hear yours, because there's a lot floating around different viewpoints of men should really be careful in how vulnerable they are, and some people even say they shouldn't be vulnerable at all. And there are women that say, no, you should be able to cry in front of me, you should be able to be as vulnerable as you need to be, and I'll love you anyway. What's your take on all this?
She might love you anyway, but she'll respect you less over time. And I'm a huge advocate of male vulnerability in the right places. Like, for example, my son, we were playing foosball. We're renting this cabin in Tennessee right now. And he started to whine because I beat him
I
at
was
foosball.
thinking, I was going to ask you if this is your house or not.
Yeah.
Super cool.
No, we're on a 2-month road trip right now. That's why I got my
nice,
to go set up here with the podcast. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
So he lost and he started like whining and complaining, and I basically sat him down. I was like, look, when you lose to somebody, an opponent, you never, ever, ever show them that weakness. And he's like, but Dad, you tell me like it's good to talk about my feelings. I'm like, yeah, it is to me. But I'm like, but right now we're opponents. And I'm like, and that's not the place for you to show vulnerability ever. I'm like, masculine vulnerability has to be in the right context. And if you're always telling your wife everything that's wrong, everything you're going through, all the pain, all the hurt, all the doubt, all the fear, she's going to carry that with her much bigger emotional capacity than you. She's going to carry that in a way that's going to damage her sense of well-being and safety in a relationship. So I've made the mistake of being way too vulnerable with Whitney and I in like marriage 1.0 before we separated. And in marriage 2.0, I can still be vulnerable to her, but it's vulnerable in particular parameters when it's appropriate. And it's never like an emotional dump of everything and me sobbing. Like,
so do you guys lay that out? Do you guys have like a framework of that, or is it just kind of is it more natural, or how does that work?
It's something that I've learned, and she's kind of coached me through over the years, by basically having conversations, like looking back on what we were before, and being like, when you were always sharing all of your problems with me, always complaining about how this relationship wasn't going well, how this thing in your life you're struggling with, how this thing at work you're afraid of. She carried all that, and her confidence in me as a man diminished as a result of it. And so when she told me this, later, and we were talking through this, that's where I kind of realized, like, okay, my emotional distress is mine to deal with. Now, that's not to say I deal with it alone. I have close friends I talk to. I have coaches, psychologists. I have tons of resources that I utilize to handle my own vulnerability. But primarily, I coach myself, and I've developed a relationship with my inner father. And so I can go to my inner father when I'm scared, and when everything is too much and I'm overwhelmed and I'm afraid of failure. And I can have a conversation with my inner father, which I think is the proper idea of who God is.
That's such a good way of putting it, dude. I also feel like I relate to that. I feel like I relate to that too. You slow down and you go, okay, wait a minute. This sucks shit right now, but I need to sort this out. And you go to your inner father. I really love that. That's a great, I've never thought of it.
Yeah, and I can visualize who he is. I have a place in my mind that I meet him. It's a particular setting where the walls and the chairs, they all look a certain way.
Long white beard.
I have a dialogue.
Long white beard, kind of chubby, like 65 years old, lives in the clouds. I guess he's God in a way.
Yeah, no, not quite there, but some of the things, like, yeah, he's got like he almost looks like a lumberjack. Like 65 years old, very manly, like looks like he's got some muscle, but he's got a little bit soft. Yeah, that's basically the idea.
So is it pretty much who you expect yourself to be, or who you could
on some level? That's for sure it. Yeah. Okay. And Freud had this idea that nobody could truly become a man until their own father died. You couldn't take that role until your own father died. And then Jung said, no, that death can be symbolic. And I heard Jordan Peterson mention that for the first time. And I've read a ton of Jung, and I base a lot of my coaching off of Jung and his students. And I said, well, I'm just going to develop my own inner father, and I'm going to have him talk to my inner child in these traumatic moments I had when I was younger, to heal myself, to make myself stronger. And when I have problems now, I go to him. And the crazy thing about these exercises is when you do them, like, I'll get advice from my inner father that I would never give myself. I'll be like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But then when I unpack it, I'm like, holy shit, that's way deeper than I would have ever come up with on my own. So I don't know how it works. Subconscious, something from another realm.
Yeah, it
works.
Wild, dude.
Yeah.
So it's almost as like you're two people.
Yeah. And That's the proper way to think, is you split yourself into two people and you have a discussion. And too often we monologue in our own heads, and then we only have access to all the stuff we already know. But trapped in our subconscious is tons of information and real genuine wisdom that our conscious mind, our prefrontal cortex, has no access to. And so we just turn over the information of all the stuff we already know. We get nothing new. If you can tap into your subconscious, you will learn things about yourself, your relationship, your place in the world that you can never figure out consciously. So that kind of stuff is really powerful. And by doing that, you can then have a safe space for yourself where you can express total vulnerability, even if nobody's around to help you out. But even better than that is if you have a band of brothers, if you have mentors in your life, coaches, a good psychologist who are almost fucking impossible to find. But if you find a good psychologist, they're worth their weight in gold. And I really believe like that's where you should be vulnerable, so that when you enter into your family life, when you enter into a relationship with your kids, with your wife, with your coworkers, with your employees, with your competitors, they don't see that vulnerability.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's just interesting. The vulnerable concept is interesting, and I agree with everything you're saying. It is wild though that as men, since we're expected to be the providers, we can't be vulnerable to the very person that's closest to us. You know, and it you know, in a sense, it's a shitty thing to realize. It's a very red-pilled, if you will, red-pilled idea, is that they'll be there for us in many respects, but when it comes down to vulnerability, we accept it from them. Like, I'm perfectly fine with a woman being vulnerable with me, and still not to too much of an extent either. Meaning, I will not get turned off with a woman's vulnerability, but if it's way too much to the point where it seems like there are too many mental issues for me to handle, even that's too big of a deal. But it's interesting that we have to be very selective and careful about how open we are.
Well, and another part of this is like women operate largely on how they feel. And this is what there's all these stupid ideas in like the men going their own way community, but how women have no honor, women have no integrity. And it's like, no, women operate on a completely different level than we do. And the way that they operate is really based in a world of emotions and feelings. They feel their way through reality. And that's wonderful for them. And I wish we could do that on some level, but we can't. We have to think our way through reality. And the reason for that is we're dangerous. We're bigger, we're stronger, we're more capable of violence. If we were to feel our way through the world, I would have beat my wife to death, like straight up, right? Because that if I allowed my feelings to take me over in conflict and stuff in the past, like very, very bad things could happen. I could harm my children. It's not safe for men to feel their way through the world. We have to have beliefs, principles, a code of honor, and we have to have our emotions submit to that. Whereas women operate in a very different way. So if we're always really, really vulnerable and expressing all of this, that makes women on some level feel unsafe, because not only do they think that they can't trust us because we're not confident, we're not strong, we're not assured about the future, we're even more terrified than they are, but also this is a guy who's driven by his emotions. He has no control over it. What if he gets angry at me and we're alone at home and he's way bigger and stronger than me, right? Whether they recognize that consciously or not, their body goes, alert, this is a danger. And so yeah, you know, poor us on some level, but that's just what it is. Like we have to be much more careful with expressing emotion than people who can't hurt us that badly, even if they try.
Very accurate. And that's also why women shit test us. You know, they constantly 100%. Constantly shit test us as a precaution to make sure that we are the confident guy we say we are, that we're not full of shit, that we are, who we claim to be. But also, like you're saying, that we're actually safe for them, that we're not posing a threat to them. So they will poke fun at you, they make fun of your shirt, they'll challenge your resolve, they'll challenge your confidence, your capabilities, and a lot of the time you have to brush it off or make a joke about it because you know, and at some point if you actually are that person, then you just naturally, you know, shrug it off. But I think a lot of go ahead.
Like if they want to trust you that when somebody breaks into your house in the middle of the night, like you got this handled, but they know like if I make fun of his shirt, he loses emotional control. It's like, that dude's not protecting me from a saber-toothed tiger. He doesn't have it, right? And so like that's just a biological, instinctual thing. They're not doing that on purpose. They're not shit testing you consciously like a guy would do, where they're thinking through, here's why I'm going to adopt this strategy because I'm looking to see what the results are.
Well, I think sometimes they do. I think sometimes they do.
Manipulatively, they can try to set you off on purpose.
No, or if like they're on a date with you and they want to be very efficient with it, they might start to just, you know, and they know they're doing it. They might just say, okay, let me just make this quick and see if this guy's even worth my time.
Yes, you know what? I'm sure that's very true, especially with the smart ones who understand what's going on. Yeah, they could definitely.
The smart ones who've been, yeah.
they've been
Sure.
around a bit. But I think by and large, they're not doing it consciously. They're just like, they're biologically trying to figure out, is this guy worth trusting or not? And so they'll make a big deal about how you didn't make them the eggs that you said you're going to make them. And you're like, what is this? But for her, it's like, testosterone is driven towards results. Estrogen creates, it's driven towards well-being. And there's this diffuse awareness that estrogen creates, where you're aware of all things at all times, you're experiencing all things at all times, you can multitask and pay attention to everything. Testosterone is like one thing I'm fully committed to. And so with estrogens, like, if they feel unsafe in that moment because you didn't make them the eggs you said you're going to make them, that's in that moment, that's the whole relationship is like that. That's the guy breaking into the middle of the night and you not being able to protect them. That's all of these things all at once. So we look at that and we're like, you're out of your mind. Like, it's just eggs. What is wrong with you? But for them, it's this much bigger emotional thing. And we can look at that and say they're crazy and they're less than us and we can look down on them, or we can say they're different. They have a different way of navigating the world and we better pay attention to those signs. So if she's upset about the eggs, I better figure out what the hell went on there so I know why she's upset about the eggs, so I can address that at a root cause level instead of just lashing back at her and getting upset.
Super accurate. Super accurate. I spoke about this recently. I spoke about this on a recent episode. I said I know which one it was. It was, have you heard of Fresh and Fit? They have a big podcast in Miami. Okay.
I've seen their clips on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, so they have a girl that works for them. She recruits the women they have on their show. She goes by an alias Icy. So I had her recently on my show, and we were talking about this. And I said, and this is something I really had to learn over the years. You have your socks on the floor, which I just will not do at this point, because when I do get married, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with the headache. But say you have dirty laundry, you didn't fold your shirt, whether she folds them or not. It is usually not about the sock. It is about something else you're not realizing. And women tend to speak in code. They don't speak directly a lot of the time, which is something I think that women should focus on consciously doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in their nature, but not all guys are going to be as intuitive as women want them to be. And that's my advice. If we can work on this a little bit more, and I understand that they want guys to just know, it's much more attractive when they just know things. If they're not getting the picture the 10th time, and you love them, and and that you want this guy to be in your life, you want him to be your boyfriend or husband, just tell him. Just tell him. If he's not getting the hint after 10 times, it doesn't mean he's an idiot. He's not trying. He's not picking up. Yeah, and if you verbalize it and he still keeps doing it, then you have a problem. But that's my take. Sometimes we just don't realize.
No, and I coach primarily men. I have some female clients as well, but I coach primarily men. And they'll always complain about this and it's like, okay, well, you want to be married to a woman, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, well, then learn how to communicate with a woman. It's not the same thing. And the same thing for women. It's like, well, that's not how I communicate. It's like, okay, well, do you want to be married to a dude? Like, yeah. Well, then you have to learn how to communicate with a dude. We communicate linearly, point A, point B. That's it. Women communicate circularly. That's right. It's like they're going to talk circles around this thing, and then if we're trying to draw a straight line from a point in the circle to the center, we're going to think that they're low IQ, illogical, incapable of rational thought. And we're just going to be like, who did I marry? This is insane. But if you can listen to that circling and then slowly extract out of that the thing they're getting at, you'll learn things about yourself and your relationship that no man could have taught you, that you could have never figured out on your own. You'd be like, holy shit, you're a genius. You have this wisdom that I have no access to because of the way you operate. But that requires, I try to understand the way you communicate and meet you on that level. And the flip side is, if you want me to do something for you and you actually tell me what you want me to do, I'll probably do it. If you don't tell me and you think that I'm going to pick up on these hints, I'm not going to. I'm not going to know that comment you made 6 months ago and then that comment you made 3 days ago that were about completely different things and to me completely unrelated were actually instructions for how to do this other third thing. I'm never going to be able to put all that together. Like, let me know instructions, write it down if you have to and send it to me in a text. Like, just give me the instructions, because that's, men love instructions.
We totally do. It from a man's perspective, it just makes us seem like we're sane and they aren't. Why do you think that women were created that way? Why do you think? And this is a fucking like philosophical question, but you have your philosophy down. Why do you think God didn't create them kind of more linearly, where they think something, they say it outright, they make it simple, we understand it, boom. Why is it this whole entire complicated maze of ideas where we have to extract information?
Yeah, so I usually take a a lens of like evolutionary behavior, right? So why would a species adapt to have the different genders doing different things? Like, well, right off the bat, it's typically more effective if you're not the same thing, right? If you're running a business and both of you are really, really good at accounting, but neither of you is good at sales, the business fails. If both of you are really, really good at sales, but neither of you are good at accounting, the business runs into disasters, right? If you have one who's really good at accounting, one who's really good at business, sales, that's a successful business. Same thing with sexually dimorphic species, where the two of them are different, do different things. And we are programmed for different things, right? Like women are programmed a lot more for raising children, right? And that makes sense. And so you have to have a very diffuse awareness. You have to be aware of a lot of things all at the same time. And an example of this would be, you take men in a traditional society, they're primarily the hunters, right? It's like, okay, we're running out of food, we need meat, go find a deer. Okay, very simple, very straightforward. You go through the forest and you ignore everything that isn't a sign of where the deer is and how to find the deer and how to kill the deer. That's a one thing, singular focus, testosterone, results. When you're the female, what you're doing is you're gathering. So you have to be wandering around and you're looking for any sign anywhere of berries or of mushrooms or of potatoes. And simultaneously, you're listening to the kids. You're watching where they're running around in the bush. You're watching to see if there's predators coming from anywhere. You're paying attention to the weather to see if it comes in. You have to get back to the cave. You're thinking about when the last time the kid. You have to be aware of so many things at the same time, right? So that single linear mind that we have doesn't function well in that environment, right? So that's why the only way that we could survive as a species is if you have both, and that's where you can combine them. It's that synergy where 1 + 1 = 5. It's really, really powerful. But if we think that women should just be little men and women think that men should just be big women, we're going to be very confused and we're going to get the wrong message all the time. I'm going to think she's illogical. She's going to think I'm uncaring. And we're going to be, talking past each other all the time.
That's so good, dude. This is phenomenal stuff. I love this. It's great.
I
agree with it so much. And it's great, man. The analogies you're using, I mean, the hunter and gatherer concept is so important. It's just our natures complement each other. As long as we can really look for the right signs and be able to figure out what's what kind of people are good for us and which people aren't, especially when choosing a partner, when you can get a good grasp on what kind of person is good for you. It's like the feminine is such an integral part of our masculine. Like it's such a helpful thing. You know how many guys, single guys, cannot keep their clothes clean, can't keep a house clean, can't keep things organized, things are a mess. And you have messy women too. I've been in a lot of messy women's cars, but overall, your eyebrows are a little out of whack. Let me fix them for you. Your nails are getting long. You should shave your back. You should do this. These are just things guys don't think about, and they're very important because a good woman will keep you groomed well. She'll keep the house clean. She'll keep food on the table. The kitchen's clean. And it's not just about keeping a house clean, but it's those things guys just overlook. And we bring that chaos into our lives because we aren't focusing on those details that matter. Because all of that, keeping cleanliness and organization helps ourselves function better. And a lot of guys, including myself, like I keep my house, it's not messy, but I don't mop as much as I should, or like it's not always spotless, but I'm not a cluttered kind of person, very much the opposite. But I know that if I was in a relationship, highly likely, because every relationship I've been in before, the woman I was with was always very much, stronger in that regard of like making sure like the table was like, Windex down and things of that nature.
Yeah, and we're often like, again, because testosterone is very much results driven. It's like, what's the most important thing I could be doing right now? It's like, it's never going to be mopping.
Right. That's exactly
right.
That's why
there's always going to be something that's more that's a singular thing that's more important. Whereas in an estrogen driven human, they're going to be aware of all the things at the same time. So as long as the floor is not mopped, they're going to be aware of that the whole time. Whereas we will not think about it once. We might have a passing thought here and there. Oh, the floor's not mopped. Oh, I could go send these emails and try to make some more money. I could go to the gym and get stronger. I could whatever it is. I could go out with the boys and have fun. Like there's going to be a single thing that's more important.
It's not important to us enough. Yep, so true.
No, so not and we don't maintain awareness of it. We're not always aware the floor is mopped. We have a passing thought the floor isn't mopped, and then it might occur to us 4 weeks later when we've got a girl coming over. Oh shit, the floor isn't mopped, right? But
that's always when it matters most.
Yeah, we're not aware of it for the 4 weeks the whole time. because that's just not how we're wired.
Right. It's so true. These things it's crazy, man. Like, I'm 29 years old, right? And I don't claim to have, and I very confidently I can say I have a pretty solid grasp on certain things, much more so than some people who are a lot older than me, because I consciously seek this knowledge. Even if I feel like there are things you're saying that I already know, but I need to hear this over and over and over again. Even if you say things that I've heard and believe, just to hear it reaffirmed and reassured, to put it back into my brain is super
100%.
important. I can hear these things a million times over because it needs to be solid. Like a martial art, you keep doing the training even if you know it already.
Mm-hmm.
Super important. So what are some other things? Because I really want to stick on the relationship topic. People are running away from marriage like the plague. What can we do aside from, or in addition to, working on normalizing gender roles and actually, having a clear idea of what a man is and what a woman is? What are some things that we can do as a society to bring marriage back, to make the one ship or the togetherness of the man and woman more of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an enormous and complex problem, right? I mean, the court system is an absolute mess with men. And 80% of divorces are initiated by women, and they can do it for almost any reason. And there's a good chance they're going to get half your money and the kids. So the risk reward in marriage is so out of whack right now that a lot of guys are choosing not to get married. And I understand that. The solution to that is a cultural one, where as a culture, we come together and we decide again that we're going to culturally reinforce the sanctity and the importance of marriage. We're going to make it a sacred thing again. We're going to encourage people to stay together. We're going to support people to stay together. We're going to make divorce more painful, not just for one side, but for both sides. But all of that I look at and I see a problem that I'm unable to solve, and that I can't think of a way as a culture we can, fix that easily. That's the thing that's going to take forever. But I think we can fix.
Oh, sorry, go on. I'll keep. Oh,
sure. What I think we can fix is our individual attitude and approach to marriage. And I think, again, when I'm talking to clients, when I'm working on myself, it's like I try to make everything my own problem. How can I solve this problem in my own life and leave the world's problems to other people? And I think the way that you approach that in your own marriage is you get married very, very carefully, and you try to get married to somebody who shares your values. Doesn't matter if she likes the same sports teams, doesn't matter if she likes the same TV shows as you, somebody who has the same values, where they're committed on a values level to making this marriage work. They're committed on a values level to doing their part, where you have a rough shared idea of what each of your parts will be. And again, there's some areas in a relationship where my wife does the masculine stuff, and there's some areas in a relationship where I do the feminine stuff. And that's what works for us. But as a whole, we're relying on a tradition of hundreds and thousands of years that came before us. So we don't have to figure that all out for ourselves.
So what are examples? What are you want to go ahead and finish your thought? But I do want to know what are examples of you doing feminine and her doing masculine.
Like I do all the kids' bedtimes.
Okay.
And I talk to them. I ask them how their day was. I talk them through emotional struggles they're having. I cuddle with them. I tuck them in. I turn out the lights. I make sure they have their pajamas on. And that's because we don't live in the same world we lived in 100 years ago, where Whitney has time to do all of that stuff. And we're also coming out of an era in marriage, like that 1950s thing where the woman did everything. The guy got home, had a whiskey, got his feet rubbed, and watched TV. That was also not ideal. And a lot of us look back to that as an ideal time where it's oh, we had good gender relations. And it's no, we really didn't, because women were still doing all the stuff that women always did, but they were doing it alone, which was not always the case. Prior to that, they would have had grandma, they would have had auntie, they would have had their sisters. There would have been a tribe of women helping them raise their kids. And we moved into this time in 30s, 40s, 50s, where it was now one woman doing all of that herself. And that obviously had to collapse at some point, because you can't do that. Women historically have worked in a tribe, and they raise their kids together, and they take care of their house together. And so for me to just put everything that is what a woman is supposed to do on Whitney, that doesn't work. She's going to collapse under that, and I can't just sit and watch TV all evening while she does everything at home, right? So I also I make a lot of the food. I do a lot of that, and that's what works for us. But when you're looking for a partner, you have to find a partner where you guys can say, hey, we can figure this out together, and we're going to find a balance that works for us. And what I see in a lot of failing relationships is the woman's bitter that she's doing stuff that she perceives she shouldn't have to do. The man's bitter that he's doing stuff that he perceives he shouldn't have to do. And it's like they never actually agreed upon this. They assumed, like people always do, this is just going to work itself out. And that might have been true when culture has told both of you what you're supposed to do. You don't have to think about it. It's just going to work out. You know your roles. That's not the case. That's not the world we live in anymore. You have to figure this out intentionally with your partner, and you have to find a partner that you think you can achieve that ideal balance of masculinity and femininity in your relationship. And you have to define what that is. So what you can do as an individual is find a relationship like that. And again, that's going to be really hard. And I understand why there's like passport bros and stuff who are going overseas to find wives who have more traditional values, because a lot of women are being told, again, not that you can be a powerful woman, but that you can do all the stuff a guy can do. You can be like a guy. And again, that's not the same thing as being an empowered, beautiful, feminine woman. So it's hard right now, for sure. It's very hard to find those type of relationships right now, because the law isn't going to help you. Culture isn't going to help you. In a lot of cases, your family's not going to give you helpful advice either. So like every problem in guys' lives, like it's up to you. You got to figure that out on your own individual level.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think what'll eventually happen is, if it has such a massive negative effect, the people who are causing that will get hurt to such a degree, meaning they'll suffer from it to such a degree where they'll either just, suffer until, God forbid, they take their own lives, or they just live in destitute situations. The world has a way of teaching you whether something works or doesn't, like one way or another, and you choose to listen to it or you don't. It's really what it comes down to. But and history repeats itself. So we've gone through certain periods like this in history to some degree, versions of this, and it's never worked. So I very much am a fan of women being able to do what they want to do, but I think it's important that that they're cognizant of to what degree, to where to take it, what parts of it, what elements of it are good and what elements aren't. And I put responsibility on both genders. I don't sit there and play the blame game. I don't play the blame game at all. Because as men, you can say, "Oh, well, women want the freedom, so let's just sit back and do nothing, and they'll work." It's like, you're missing it, dude.
Yeah, you're not going to be any happier in that relationship. And she is definitely not going to be. She's going to be so resentful of you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a horrible thing, man. It's a horrible thing. Yeah. So this is all phenomenal stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, man. No, I feel like we had a pretty far-ranging discussion there. So yeah, no, nothing that's popping out anyway.
Awesome, dude. I look forward to meeting you. Really would be awesome. So
definitely, we'll do that when I'm in Florida.
Dude, I am really hoping to get on Lex Friedman's podcast. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but he just recently made a post wanting to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I know I would bring a killer debate to the table. It wouldn't be against him because he's kind of in the middle. He's Jewish, but he kind of plays a passive role. He doesn't know that much about it, so he doesn't really try to take any side. But he made a post saying that he wants to have people that know about this space talk about it, and I know very much about it from what I've told you. So if I do get the honor of going to him in Austin, that would be, hopefully I can, come to Texas for other reasons, hang out and whatnot. But that would, if I go on Lex Friedman's show, we definitely have to meet, man. And hopefully I can maybe even bring you along to listen if he's okay with it.
That would be amazing. I'd love that.
You can meet him, hopefully. So that would be fantastic. So
my wife knows him actually through jiu-jitsu. So she's they're not like friendly enough where she could ask for put in a good word necessarily, but I've bumped into him a couple times on the mats at 10th Planet in Austin.
Really?
And my wife, more than a few times.
Oh, because I was saying if she knows him well enough, if she could put in a word, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, I'll let her know. Mention that next time she sees him. But we're not going to be in Austin for a few months anyway. So
right, you're on the road. I got you. Okay, well, Matt, you are really, really an intelligent human being, and I love the way you look at things. You're all about accountability, responsibility, hard work, helping people. You have a really great attitude. I really like who you are as a person. I'm looking forward to getting to know you more.
Thank you, sir. Ditto. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you, bro. We're very like-minded for sure. So, ladies and gents, I hope if you made it this far, I hope you really enjoyed This has been another episode of Soothing Semantics. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, smash the like button, leave your comments. Of course, for all of your real estate needs, I would be very, very happy to help you. So make sure to follow me at Rafi the Realtor. And you can also follow Matt. Let me give you the handle. It's the Sovereign Male. It's the_sovereign_man. Follow him. Click on the links. Get in touch with him if there's anything that you are lacking in your life. You're looking to become a better human being. Get in touch with him. Anything you want to add?
Very much. No, man. I appreciate the plug. Yeah, and anybody who wants to talk to me, I've got a link in my bio on Instagram, the_sovereign_man. And yeah, we can chat 50 minutes to my calendar. No sales pitch, just a chance to get to know each other anytime. So I'm happy to do that.
Fantabulous. All right, guys, thank you again for watching. This has been Real Peace.